The ballroom shimmered with golden light and the chatter of 50 guests. I adjusted the strap of my simple black dress, feeling out of place at my cousin Lila's lavish engagement party. It was my first big family event since the layoff, and my confidence felt as thin as glass. Just as I gathered the courage to join my parents at their table, a hand gripped my elbow. Aunt Caroline pulled me close, her smile painted on for the crowd. Her whisper was a sharp hiss in my ear. "Serafina, darling, a quick word. Please don't mention your little situation tonight. Let's keep things upbeat for Lila." The humiliation was a physical blow. I forced a smile and nodded, my cheeks burning. I was still reeling when Daniel, the fiancé, stood for his toast. He raised his glass, then his eyes found mine in the crowd. "And I hear you're between jobs, Serafina. Must be tough in the marketing world these days." A ripple of polite laughter followed. I froze, the room tilting. The night became a blur of quiet smiles and averted eyes. And then I saw it, the ghost of a smirk on Aunt Caroline's face. This was no accident. The party's noise became a distant hum as I stood frozen. Across the room, Aunt Caroline moved through the crowd, her laughter sounding like shattered glass. I caught snippets of her conversation with the Millers, our longtime family friends. "We all make our own luck," she declared, her voice carrying just enough. "Some people simply lack the resilience to recover from minor setbacks." Her eyes briefly flickered in my direction, confirming the barb was meant for me. I couldn't breathe in that gilded cage any longer. Making weak excuses to my parents, I fled to the parking lot. The cool night air offered little relief from my burning shame. Headlights suddenly illuminated me. Daniel's sports car pulled up beside mine. "Serafina, wait! That was an awful joke in there," he said, stepping out with his hands raised. "It just slipped out." His tone felt rehearsed, like lines from a play. Then he added, "Caroline mentioned we should have a united front about, well, keeping up appearances." He froze, realizing he'd revealed too much. The apology wasn't genuine, it was part of their script. I drove home through blurred vision, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every detail replayed in my mind. Daniel's condescending smile, the guests' pitying glances, Caroline's triumphant smirk. The humiliation etched itself deep into my bones. The next morning, my mother called, her voice heavy with concern. "I spoke with Caroline," she began carefully. "She said she had to protect Lila's special day from any negativity." I could hear the quotation marks in my mother's voice. She told me, "You know how Serafina always manages to draw attention to herself." That was the final, unforgivable twist. Not only had they orchestrated my public shaming, but they were now painting me as the villain, the selfish cousin who would overshadow the bride. The crushing weight of despair suddenly transformed into something else. Cold, hardened resolve. They thought they'd broken me. They had no idea they'd awakened something far more dangerous. This injustice would not stand. For days, I moved through my apartment like a ghost, the anger simmering beneath my skin. I needed direction, but the job rejections kept coming, each one chipping away at my remaining confidence. Desperate for normalcy, I ventured to the grocery store, hiding behind sunglasses. That's when I literally collided with Tom, sending his grocery basket tumbling. He was a former client from my agency days, always sharp and perceptive. Over coffee, I gave him the abbreviated version of my situation. His keen eyes saw right through my brave facade. "Listen, Serafina," he said, leaning forward. "I launched my own consulting firm last month. I'm drowning in work and need someone with your strategic mind. It's freelance to start, but it's meaningful work." My bruised ego screamed refusal, but my wounded pride roared louder. I accepted the lifeline. As we stood to leave, he casually added, "Our first major client is a luxury conglomerate, Carlson Holdings." The name struck me like a physical blow. That was Uncle Richard's company. The freelance project became my anchor in a sea of turmoil. I immersed myself in Carlson Holdings' flawed PR strategies, analyzing their missteps and identifying missed opportunities. For the first time in months, I felt the familiar thrill of intellectual engagement. During our weekly video review, Tom listened intently to my analysis. "This is exceptional work, Serafina, truly. It's the strategic foresight and nuanced understanding we've been missing." He scrolled through my report, a frown forming. "The board is furious with their internal team's constant blunders. They're creating more problems than they solve." He looked directly at the camera, his expression serious. Frankly, you might be the only one who can fix the mess they've created. A spark of my former self, the confident executive I thought I'd lost, flickered back to life. This was no longer just a project. It was my proving ground, and I was determined to conquer it. Fueled by Tom's confidence and my own burning resolve, I delved deeper into Carlson Holdings' corporate structure. Late-night research sessions revealed the truth. Richard, Caroline's husband, controlled the entire PR budget as head of communications. The company's troubles ran deeper than poor strategy. Industry blogs whispered about ethical lapses, questionable contracts, and a culture of favoritism that was damaging their luxury brand. Richard's department stood at the epicenter of the storm. A slow, cold smile finally spread across my face for the first time in weeks. I was no longer the unemployed niece to be pitied and silenced. I was the external consultant with a backstage pass to their greatest vulnerabilities. The stage was perfectly set for the most silent, professional reckoning imaginable. Tom secured my position as a silent observer in key strategy meetings. I joined video calls with my camera off, listed only as consultant Tom's team. I listened to Richard's team deliver flimsy presentations filled with empty promises. Using my insights, I crafted strategies that expertly navigated around their incompetence. My anonymous recommendations began systematically cleaning up their messes. During one call, Richard himself praised the new direction. "Tom, your consultant is a miracle worker. These proposals are exactly what we needed." The irony was almost palpable. Days later, at a tense family dinner, Caroline sighed dramatically. "Richard's firm is wasting money on outside consultants. Apparently, the internal team can't be trusted with anything important." She had no idea the consultant was sitting beside her, calmly cutting her steak. I concealed my smile with a sip of water. Aunt Caroline hosted an elaborate dinner to showcase Lila's wedding plans. A massive, leather-bound planner dominated the table. I listened patiently as she detailed extravagant floral arches and a 7-course menu. My mother, seeking to include me, gently interjected. "Serafina has been doing some impressive consulting work lately. She's been so dedicated." Caroline waved a dismissive hand without glancing my way. "Oh, project work? Well, it's wonderful you're keeping busy, dear. The flexibility must be nice." The condescension was a familiar sting, but then Daniel, who had been quiet, looked up from his phone, a curious glint in his eye. "Consulting? That's impressive. Which firm?" Caroline's head snapped toward him. "Daniel, sweetheart, the wine needs refreshing," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for further discussion. The subject was closed, but his interest was noted. Daniel's curiosity didn't fade. A few days later, a connection request appeared on my LinkedIn. It was him. His message felt oily and insincere. "Heard about your consulting gig. Really admire the grind." Why was Lila's fiancé so interested in my professional life? A quick search of his profile revealed a sparse employment history of short-lived junior roles. The pieces didn't fit. That evening, while compiling my report for Tom, a notification appeared from a job portal, a forwarded application. The candidate, Daniel Price. The position, Junior Executive Corporate Communications. The company, Carlson Holdings. My breath caught in my throat. He was trying to weasel his way into Richard's department. With my internal access, uncovering the truth was simple. I cross-referenced hiring records and internal directories. The evidence was undeniable. Daniel had been hired as a junior executive 3 weeks after the engagement party. The digital authorization was Richard's. There was no record of a standard interview process. It was blatant, unapologetic nepotism. This scheme was bigger than my humiliation. Caroline was strategically installing her future son-in-law into the family business, using her husband's influence to bypass all protocols. I thought of kind, trusting Lila, dreaming of her wedding, completely unaware she was a pawn in her mother's social climbing game. The stakes had just been raised, and my cousin's future happiness was now part of the equation. I became a phantom within Carlson Holdings' digital halls. I worked diligently to bolster their public image while meticulously documenting the rot within. I archived emails where Richard approved exaggerated consulting fees that aligned perfectly with Daniel's hiring. I mapped a trail of dubious vendor contracts and budget approvals that circumvented standard oversight. I built my case not with emotion but with cold, irrefutable data. I presented my official project conclusions to Tom, highlighting the strategic successes. Then I showed him the confidential file. His face darkened as he scrolled. "This is gross misconduct, Serafina." He took a deep breath. "I am obligated to present your full findings to the Carlson board, and I'm naming you as the primary investigator." My heart hammered against my ribs. The point of no return had been reached. Lila's bridal shower was a garden party filled with pastel decorations and forced cheer. I wore a confident, elegant dress that made me feel powerful. Caroline, of course, noticed immediately. She glided over, air-kissing my cheeks. "What a charming outfit, Serafina," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's so good you're trying again. Let's not draw too much attention, though." I held her gaze, my smile serene and unshakable. "Thank you, Aunt Caroline. I've found my work speaks for me these days." Confusion flashed in her eyes before she was whisked away by another guest. I endured the party, my secret knowledge a shield against her barbs. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline was mundane but explosive to me. Carlson Holdings Board orders emergency internal audit. The first domino had been tipped. My phone erupted. First my mother, then a cascade of texts from relatives. The family gossip network was alight with news of the audit. The most revealing call came from Caroline herself. "Serafina," she whispered, panic fraying her words. "There's chaos at Richard's company. An audit. You're in that world now, with your little job. Have you heard anything?" I made my voice sound small and worried. "An audit? That sounds serious. I just handle the projects Tom gives me. I'm not involved in board matters." She hung up, unsatisfied. An hour later, Tom called. "The board was impressed and appalled. They've seen your evidence. They want to meet the consultant who uncovered this. They want to meet you, Serafina." I looked at my reflection, at the woman who had been publicly shamed. Now, she was being summoned to the throne room. The Carlson Holdings boardroom was a temple of dark wood and silent authority. I entered, posture perfect, my file in hand. Richard was present. His face, already pale, collapsed into utter shock when he saw me. "You?" he choked out, his mouth agape. "It was you all along?" I offered no smile. I simply nodded to the board chairman and began my presentation. My voice was steady, my evidence incontrovertible. I outlined the successful strategy I'd implemented, then seamlessly transitioned to the proof of misconduct, the nepotism, the financial indiscretions. I was professional, precise, and utterly devastating. When I finished, the room was utterly silent. The chairman, a stern woman named Miss Irwin, leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "Ms. Reed," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet, "we'd like you to lead our new Ethics and Public Relations Compliance Division." The news tore through our family like a hurricane. Richard was suspended, his corporate privileges revoked. Daniel's employment was terminated immediately, a permanent black mark on his record. Caroline's meticulously constructed world was disintegrating. She spun wild tales to anyone who would listen, blaming corporate rivals, all to preserve the illusion of Lila's perfect wedding. But the truth was a tide she could not hold back. I remained silent, allowing the consequences to resonate. I was preparing for my new role when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lila on my doorstep, her face ravaged by tears, her eyes wide with betrayal and confusion. The wedding was just weeks away. I made Lila tea and let her weep. When the storm subsided, she looked at me, her heartbreak laid bare. "Daniel left me," she whispered. "He said the drama was too much." Then she confessed what she'd overheard, a vicious argument between her parents, her mother's voice sharp and clear. "I told you we needed to humble Serafina publicly. It was the perfect way to make Daniel appear more stable, more accomplished by comparison, to strengthen his position before we brought him into the company." Lila's world, built on her mother's lies, had shattered. She saw her engagement for what it was, a transactional maneuver, with her as the primary commodity. I held her hand, comforting my cousin, but my mind was already strategizing. The final act needed to ensure her clean escape and provide a closure we both deserved. Despite everything, the wedding invitation arrived. Heavy, cream-colored paper, engraved with elaborate script. It was a monument to Caroline's denial. I knew my presence was required for her facade. My absence would fuel the gossip she feared. I called her. Her voice was brittle, layered with counterfeit warmth. Serafina, dear, you're still family. Of course you're invited. Let's forgive and forget for Lila's sake. It was the most hollow peace offering I'd ever received. I'll be there, I said, my voice calm. I hung up, the final piece of my plan clicking into place. The wedding would be Caroline's last stand. I spent the week before the wedding establishing myself in my new position. The authority was empowering, not for the title, but for the justice it represented. Tom called to check in. They'll come begging, Serafina. You're untouchable now. Be prepared. I was. The call came as predicted. Caroline's voice was a trembling whisper, a stark contrast to her usual command. Serafina, I know we've had our difficulties, but you're in that powerful role now, with the board. Perhaps we could reach an agreement? Ensure the family name is protected in your reports? She was finally, truly terrified. The board's mandate is absolute transparency, Caroline, I stated evenly and ended the call. The curtain was about to rise. The rehearsal dinner was held in a grand ballroom, the air thick with unspoken tensions. Caroline, draped in expensive silk, moved through the crowd, radiating false cheer. She descended upon me, her voice artificially bright. And we are all so immensely proud of Serafina. To rise so high after her challenges. It's truly remarkable. Her eyes challenged me to react. I merely nodded, sipping my wine, playing my part to perfection. As Daniel rose to give his toast, a synchronized chime of phones erupted around the room. The company-wide announcement email had just been distributed. I watched as guests glanced at their screens, then at me. My name was in the headline, my new title, Head of Ethics and Public Relations, displayed in bold font. The murmuring began instantly. The polite dinner conversation swelled into a loud buzz. Daniel, mid-sentence, stumbled over his words as he saw the screen of the groomsman beside him. His face went ashen. Caroline's smile solidified into a grimace. Lila, seated beside him, looked from his horrified expression to my composed one, and understanding dawned, replacing her confusion. Before Daniel could continue, the wedding planner rushed over, whispering frantically in his ear. Daniel pulled out his phone, tapping desperately. His company access badge, linked to an app, flashed red. Access terminated. The exposed, unemployed groom dropped his champagne flute, shattering it on the marble floor, and stormed out of the room, in disgrace. I retreated to a quiet lounge to collect my wrap, the chaos of the dissolved dinner echoing from the main hall. The door burst open. Caroline stood there, her elegant composure vaporized, her face twisted with rage. You, she snarled. You engineered this. You planned this from the very beginning. This is your vengeance. I looked at her. This woman who had dedicated herself to my diminishment. My voice was soft yet unyielding. You instructed me not to mention my job loss. You were ashamed of my failure. It turns out that humiliation was the catalyst for my greatest strength. The fury drained from her. The rage melted into a stark, ugly comprehension of her own ruin. She didn't weep. She simply crumpled, sinking into a velvet armchair. I walked out, leaving her amidst the opulent ruins of her own making, and closed the door. The wedding was officially canceled the next morning. Lila, with a fortitude I deeply admired, issued a brief, graceful statement. She later confided that after fleeing the dinner, Daniel had called her, not to apologize, but to rage about his ruined career. He'd admitted he never loved her. The relationship was a strategic alliance orchestrated by Caroline. The perfect empire Caroline had built, brick by brick with deception and manipulation, had imploded. Then, the final blow landed without my involvement. An anonymous press leak, likely from a disgruntled board member, exposed the specifics of Richard's ethical breaches and the nepotism scandal. The story was printed in the business section for all the world to see. I visited my mother a few days later. Her home was a sanctuary of calm. She looked at me with a complex mix of pride and sorrow. "Oh, Serafina," she sighed. "What Caroline did was monstrous, but was it necessary to dismantle their entire lives?" I took her hand. "I didn't dismantle them, Mom. They did that to themselves. I merely held up a mirror." She squeezed my hand, finally understanding. Later, Tom called. "The board is ecstatic. You've handled an impossible situation with impeccable integrity. The freelance position is no longer on the table." My heart sank for a moment until he continued. "I'm offering you a permanent executive leadership role here with me, and a partnership. You've earned it 10 times over." Months drifted by. The gossip eventually faded. Caroline and Richard withdrew from their social circles, their name now synonymous with scandal. Lila, liberated from her mother's ambitions, began therapy and started building a life on her own terms. She came for coffee one afternoon, her demeanor lighter than I'd ever seen it. "Thank you," she said simply, "for showing me what real strength is. It isn't about maintaining a perfect image, it's about confronting the broken pieces and rebuilding something true." After she left, a delivery arrived, a breathtaking arrangement of white orchids. The card bore no signature, only a typed message, "For your unwavering integrity and quiet power." The board. I placed them on my desk, a silent monument to justice. My mother hosted a small, intimate family gathering. The atmosphere was warm, the conversation genuine. I was sharing a laugh with Lila when the doorbell chimed. It was Caroline. She looked diminished, dressed in simple, unadorned clothing. She avoided everyone's gaze, lingering on the periphery. As dessert was served, my mother gestured for me to say a few words. I stood, glass in hand. I looked around at my true family. "To losing everything you thought defined you," I said, my gaze briefly touching Caroline's downcast eyes, "and to finding your true self in the aftermath." Everyone raised their glasses in a warm, supportive toast. Caroline studied her hands, silent. For the first time, the silence in the room didn't feel like shame. It felt like peace.